I am so incredibly grateful for this week and the conversations that we've been having with different guests, specifically around health. And yesterday was a bit of a recap around my attendance of the Joe Dispenza 7 week long retreat. And there's so much more that I could say. But today, in looking at the week prior leading up to today, I really want to kind of circle back on health and circle back on some of the things that I explored further with the Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, as well as some of the conversations we had, because health is something that I'm in New York right now, rather just outside of the city, on the New Jersey side, meeting with a client for a knowing intensive. And we're just spending 48 hours together and just going deep into their brand, going deep into who they are as a business, their vision. And y'all, there's something about just being physically with people and sharing meals together, sharing space together, physical space, that really allows for us to go on a deeper level. And frankly, I don't think I'll ever work with another client again without having this deep, intensive time together. And not necessarily the amount of time, perhaps, but even just the literal sharing a meal. We started out with a knowing dinner, and these are dinners that I've been hosting over the last year and a half whenever I'm traveling or speaking at a conference in another city, and we'll just welcome a group of people together. And we have really meaningful connections and conversations. And even tonight, we started out our knowing intensive weekend with a knowing dinner, and I just got to know them and really heard a lot about their stories and their childhood and who are they at their core, both as it pertains to formative moments in their life, but also what do they love about each other, because this client in particular is a couple who have they're the founders of their business, and they're doing some really, really cool stuff. But in order for me to create the strategies, I need to know the stories that ultimately set them apart in order to inform the brand, and really allow for the strength of the brand to inform the marketing that we execute across different channels and campaigns, etc. But we have to know who we are, and then we have to examine our customers and really get to know them on a personal level, and then allow for the emotional connection to take place, propelled by the marketing strategies that are absolutely critical, absolutely necessary. But it's so important that we really take the time to get to know who we are so that we do stand out, especially in this world of AI, where there's constantly content created that's not originated by the individual, but it's just kind of pumped out by this AI bot. We have to learn how to alchemize our content and alchemize ourselves, which is our greatest asset, through the utilization of these really important tools. But we have to do the work to know who we are first. And I'm actually super excited. Next week, I'll be moderating a webinar with an incredible therapist, Paul Sheasley, and then he's a performance coach as well as therapist. And I'm really, really excited because he's going to be partnering with his co-host, with a gentleman out from London. And the three of us will be having a conversation, and they're just going to be going back and forth about what constitutes great leadership, what actually typically gets in the way of somebody being able to get to that next level. And at the end of it, kind of at the baseline, it's who are you? Who is coming to the table in the way that you lead? Who's coming to the table in the way that you show up in relation to your customers, but also just at the end of the day, the heart of your brand, because it does reflect who you are. Whether you have a personal brand or a strong company brand, y'all, I saw this happen. We're talking this webinar next week, which I'll drop a link to it here in the chat. I'm so excited to be a part of this. And it expands, this need to know who we are expands beyond just these small businesses, beyond personal brands. It extends into large organizations. I served as fractional chief marketing officer for a $75 million home services business. And they had, multiple offices in multiple states. And the strength and integrity of the brand was really conjured by the leadership team. Well, they ended up actually getting acquired, and the integrity of the brand just kind of slowly started to melt away. And I just started seeing, I actually stepped away from working with them as the fractional chief marketing officer. Frankly, they needed someone in house, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to maintain that involvement. But I saw the fracturing inside the organization as the private equity company came in, as the founder and owners started moving away, as these people started making very important data-driven decisions, but then they lost the emotional aspect of who they are and the integrity of the brand. And so what's so critical is that we, yes, make data-driven decisions, which is predicated in the intellectual intelligence, the IQ, but then we accompany those decisions, the data-driven decisions, with emotion-driven decisions. And by emotion-driven decisions, I'm talking about the power of story. I'm talking about the ability to connect on an emotional level with the ultimate end customer. And this is beyond just the end customer. It's also our internal employees, our internal team. The way that we lead starts from within and then extends to without the organization. Our interaction with the customer needs to end up being kind of the outer workings of the strength of the core, the strength of the inner self and body, which is the kind of the body of the organization. And so then, okay, so if we're on the same page here, that whether it's a personal brand or a company brand, we need to know who we are. Well, I want to take it on an individual level right now, because when we think about, and this is on the heels of spending the last week talking about health and the power of, we talked about with Dimitri, actually engaging with sunlight and getting the infrared light and getting natural daylight, and how there's rays in the sunlight that actually have blue rays. And it's really critical for our skin and for our health and for our development. And we also talked with Janae about knowing what's going on with our body and how so many women are actually struggling with endometriosis, but it's going undiagnosed because, one, lack of funding in research in women's health, but also we don't listen to our bodies very intuitively. And so we end up finding ourselves really struggling on a physiological level. And that can either be a result of emotional discomfort and emotional disconnection with our own selves, which is partially what we're going to be talking about in this webinar on Friday next week. And then also there's the disconnect with our own health, right? So our kind of like the quality of our physical health can be a result and a mirror of what's going on where we might have an emotional disconnection, or we're actually not getting the literal nutrients that we need on a day-to-day basis. And so when we talk about ourselves being our greatest asset, you are your greatest asset. That is in every regard. The strength of your brand is 100% predicated on who is behind the brand in and of itself. I work with companies and I just see where we can, our job's to bring leads in the door, right? But then if you don't have the right customer care support, if you don't have the right people in place, it just starts breaking little by little with every single step down and progression through the customer journey. So the strength of the organization predicates on the people. Same thing with our individual selves. You are your greatest asset. If we're not cultivating our own physical health and well-being and investing in that, who was I talking to? I was attending an event 3 years ago. I believe it was at Genius Network in Arizona. And at this event, Robert or JFK, RFK Jr., man, JFK, that's a throwback. RFK Jr. was speaking at this event. And we were talking a lot about healthcare. And this was before the election. So it was a couple years ago. But one of the comments that was made was, we can have massive callings in our life. We can have so many wonderful aspirations, things that we're aiming for, striving for, seeking to accomplish. Yet if we don't have literally the physiological and emotional health to then back it up, we're just going to crumble. And we're not actually able to complete the mission that usually is incorporated and very much tied to the intellectual intelligence. It requires so much of our mental wherewithal and cognitive capabilities. But if our emotional and our physiological health are waning or dwindling, we're never going to be able to maximize on the calling, which is given so uniquely to every single one of us. And so there's a fundamental respect and regard that we need to give our physical bodies to ensure that we're able to function and operate at the kind of the peak performance. And so when we think about performing, whether it's within our business, for our clients, even today, I'm here just outside of New York City and working on this knowing intensive with this client of mine. So much of we actually started the conversation surrounding health and how seed oils are actually incredibly detrimental to our health, and how I shared about this about a month ago, but it's been a little bit of time. I was doing some research about seed oils because one of our clients she's actually known as the mother of the seed oil movement. And so in creating content for her and creating an offer for her, I learned about the Hateful Eight seed oils, and it includes canola oil, it includes peanut oil, it includes all these different oils that are seen on most labels that I just never knew were pretty harmful and damaging to us. Yet I found a remarkable difference when I was overseas in Paris and then Italy for about 8 weeks in total. I came back and my parents, I came back from my trip, and my parents are just wonderful humans. And I had this canister of cashews waiting for me along with flowers, and they just made my condo look so pretty when I came back, and it was so wonderful. I was eating cashews. Cashews are supposed to be pretty good for you, right? Like very innocent nuts. And man, I just started feeling so sick. And I looked at the canister on the back. I was like, what? Like, why am I feeling so sick? I just came back from being overseas traveling. And when I looked at the ingredients, it was cashews and peanut oil. And I realized that peanut oil is actually one of those Hateful Eight seed oils that Dr. Cate Shanahan said that deems as one of her Hateful Eights. And Dr. Cate Shanahan, she's worked with the Lakers. She actually created the meal plan for the Lakers, and worked really closely with Michael Jordan and a bunch of other basketball players. She's written New York Times bestsellers. So she's a notorious author, a notorious doctor, and it's relatively simple to just stop eating those seed oils. I'll say but and because it's really actually a really difficult thing to just stop eating these seed oils. Y'all, I called a couple of restaurants the other day just saying, hey, like, do you guys cook with seed oils? Am I able to substitute butter and olive oil? Because ever since I kind of went on a cleanse unintentionally being overseas, because no other country in the world that I am aware of uses seed oils, just the US. And so as I was calling these restaurants, I saw that a couple of folks were saying, hey, we actually don't use seed oils. Good news, we only use canola oil. But that's actually one of the Hateful Eight oils. And so what I realized was that, one, there's just such little education. I'm just starting to learn myself kind of what I should and should not eat. And even talking with Dimitri earlier this week, for those of you who are listening, understanding the points of the day that we should actually be getting the sunlight. It's the early morning, midday, and then also in the evening. And like the different rays and the lights that are coming through at that time offer really critical nutrients for our body. And so there's just these little nuances that I'm learning along the way, even learning this week that our water, and I've heard this, but I didn't really understand that our water has fluoride, which is actually very toxic for us. And it's just like, oh my goodness, what all these things about health that I just never thought too much about. I'm learning as I'm just really focusing on health. Earlier this year, I just had this moment where I really, I guess I just kind of recognized that I've never really focused on my body. I would work out to look a certain way, not necessarily to feel a certain way. And I wasn't necessarily honoring the body for the purpose of strength, for the purpose of my mission, for the purpose of performing at the highest capacity. And y'all, when we get really clear on our why, that's when real change starts to happen. And so as I've realized over this last year, just the intent for health is so that I can execute on my calling. The intent for my health is so that I truly can be my own greatest asset, rather than constantly outsourcing everything that I need to everybody else, by way of coming almost like back to home in terms of caring for my body, in terms of really allowing for myself to feel, like truly feel so strong, so healthy, so aligned. I talk so much about vertical alignment, which is really aligning my behavior, emotions, actions, beliefs under the hierarchy of my ideal. And not even just my ideal, but there's something higher than that, which is the divine, and almost like the moral guidelines and the moral structure for how I want to adhere my life. And so when we talk about vertical alignment, I'm even thinking now, as I'm talking, I'm just considering how and where does health really fit into that? Because if I really believe that the ability to accomplish my ideal and live in accordance with my ideal includes and is predicated on this health physiologically, well, then emotional health actually needs to be right up there in terms of importance with physiological health. So I was learning even just this week about, hearing that there's fluoride in our water, which is a toxin. My sister-in-law, she also uses, she puts these certain droplets in her water just to actually add minerals back in. Because one of the things in Italy, for example, I was staying in, Lake Como, and there was just a waterfall right outside of my window, and the waterfall had a cistern right in the town. It kind of had an offshoot into the cistern, and people would just fill up their water jugs and pitchers in the local town cistern, and then they would take it home and drink it. And so I realized during that time, I was like, wow, like I feel like I'm actually getting satiated from this water. I'm not just drinking and then still feeling thirsty. And I bought these drops. The brand is Aussie Trace Minerals, and I'll drop the link here in a minute when I jump off. The water since then, I've been drinking it, and I've been drinking out of my little Stanley cup. My best friend bought this for me a little while ago, and it's just absolutely adorable. And I just take it with me everywhere I go. And I've been putting about 10 to 15 of these droplets in my, I think it's a 40-ounce Stanley cup. And y'all, I feel like I'm drinking something. Like it's not just empty liquid. And I feel like it's actually satiating my thirst. And the final thing that I'm realizing as well is that I actually don't need to drink as much. So as we're learning and cultivating our own knowledge around what does health really mean and look like, as well as our own ability to really, how do I want to say this? Really dedicate the time, attention, and honor to our bodies, to allow for us to look at the physical self and pay attention to the physical self. Because I actually shared this with the client this evening as we were just getting to know one another. We were talking about health, we were talking about seed oils, and I just shared my experience coming back from Italy. And, I ate pasta over there, pizza over there, and gluten, dairy doesn't bother so many people, where here, they actually have an intolerance. And I just mentioned, I actually, growing up in a very Christian conservative environment, we were very much so encouraged to just not even think about the body. Like it's actually better to just pretend like it's not there. There was just a lot of shame and guilt over our body. And so my question for you, as just a takeaway from this conversation, is what is your current relationship with your physical body? As I've been writing these 21 days of vertical alignments, and I had the first week really dedicated to the physical body. So as I was writing those, I just really took a moment to kind of feel physically in my body how people might actually engage with their physical body, perhaps for the first time in either a really long time or ever. How many times are you actually really looking in the mirror and seeing you? How many times are you actually looking at your hands and recognizing this beautiful body that's yours, scars and all, right? The bruises and even the physical limitations. How is that serving us? How is that cultivating our character? How are the parts of us that we don't like actually part of our story? And as we think about ourself being our greatest asset, it's not just our soul. It can be our physical, and it is. It's not just it can be, it is our physical body. Our physical body is so critical that it is healthy and well and nourished and strong so that it can accomplish that which we're called to. So I'm doing a much deeper dive into health in general. And as I'm learning, I'll be sharing it with you. And I'd love to hear from you. What are the things that you found that are meaningful to you? I really, really want to live a life that is marked by health in every area, in every one of these intelligences: emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physical. I want to be healthy in each one of these areas because, y'all, this is such a precious opportunity living this life. When I turned 32 a couple weeks ago, the morning of my birthday, I just remembered my brother-in-law. You know, he was killed at 26, and we have such a responsibility to live a life that we're worthy of, that we're proud of, that we can look back on at the end of our life and say, I'm so proud of the legacy I've left, because I lived every single day with intention, so that now I can look back and I've truly created a legacy. You know, I had this moment where I realized today, right now, I'm writing my legacy and I'm living it right now. Right now, I'm living the moments that I'll one day look back on and say, oh, remember when. And so if we really believe, we have to really believe that you and I are our greatest asset. Otherwise, we will never do the work that it takes and requires for us to invest in ourselves, to then be able to look back and say, wow, I'm so incredibly proud. We'll be living on autopilot otherwise. For so long as we're disconnected from our physical self, for so long as we're disconnected from our emotional self, we will never be able to really alchemize that which we were created to be, the body which we were given. So we have to take the time and create this space in our days and in our lives to sit in the quiet, to sit in the moments of stillness, to then feed and nurture our physical bodies, to feed and nurture our spirit. And then also it's also a cleansing of sorts as well. I actually am excited to start fasting more. There's something about just kind of almost allowing for the true filtration and processing and filtration of the of what's already there. So we talk about doing that on an emotional level, allowing for the inputs to have time to really gestate and be filtered before we then continue to feed it more. It's like our information processing center gets clogged up, and then our outputs are actually inconsistent. So if we want to be able to really live a life that we're proud of and be healthy along the way while doing so, our physical body needs a semblance of a break as well. You know, there's actually some real research and data backing up to giving for farmers, giving the land a year of just rest in between all of that soil. Otherwise, well, I won't go into the science of it because I can't use the proper languaging that they have, but there is a ton of research that goes into why and how it is critical that we allow the land to effectively reset every 7 years or so. And y'all, we have to be doing the same thing with our own body, with our mind, with our spirit. Are we allowing the space and time for the reset to occur, for the filtering through and processing of what's already in there before just adding another layer? I actually, this past week, I went and I had breakfast before I did any kind of exercise or workout. And I just felt like I added food on top of what was there without ever doing the work to actually move and kind of work out any part of me. I just added a layer and I felt heavy, and it felt a little bit like a weight. And that's not what food's supposed to do. It's supposed to fuel us. It's supposed to be moving us forward and propelling us into this rich and beautiful and precious life that we live. So with that, I would love to hear from you in maybe direct message. If you wouldn't mind shooting me a note, I would love to hear what it is that you're incorporating into your life on a kind of a health element. Paul Sheasley on Instagram says, when your values, focus, and actions are vertically aligned, decisions get easier, momentum builds, and burnout fades. Misalignment is expensive. Oh, I love that line. Misalignment is expensive. And Paul, I am so excited about our conversation on the 15th. I know it's going to be amazing with you and Michael. So y'all, misalignment is expensive. I'll end with Paul's quote there. Misalignment is expensive. And it is so critical that each one of us takes the time and space to filter and process what's already inside of us so that we can effectively create space for something new to be